Hello viewers, welcome back to Learn Bio 360. In the series of lectures, I am going to talk about how do organisms reproduce. So these lectures are based on class 10th CBSE textbook. So in this chapter, we are going to talk about reproduction, introduction to the reproduction part. Thereafter, I will be talking about types of reproduction, and as we all know, there are two types of reproduction. One is asexual mode of reproduction and another one is the sexual mode of reproduction. So of these two, which is important and why it is important, we are going to get a clear clarity on this. After that, we are going to look at some types of asexual reproduction. Thereafter, we are going to talk about reproduction in flowering plants, that is sexual reproduction in the flowering plants. Then sexual reproduction in humans, and after this we are going to talk about the most important aspect, that is reproductive health. So in this part we are going to talk about some issues prevailing in the society like overpopulation and sexually transmitted diseases and many other aspects. So with this, let me move on to the introduction part of this chapter. So we all know that reproduction is one of the important life processes. Though it is an important life process, it is not necessary for survival, growth and development, right? This is an important life process, but it is not necessary for survival, growth and development of an organism. So because of this, we are not studying it in under the life processes chapter. Okay. Then why it is important? It is important because to continue the life. Perpetuation means the continuation of life. What happens if there is no continuation of life? What happens if there is no reproduction? We cannot give birth to our young ones. Not only we, all living organisms cannot give birth to their young ones. So what happens if there is no young ones, there is no reproduction? It will lead to the problem called extinction. What is extinction? It means disappearing. The species will get disappeared. Okay, the species will get disappeared. So can you see the dinosaurs today? No. Why? Because they have become extinct. So in the same way, if the organism stops reproduction, there will be an extinction. We can't see them, those species again on this earth. So this is because the reproduction is important for the continuation of life, race or any particular species. So in simple words, reproduction is the biological process by which new individual organisms are produced by the parents. So in simple words, what is reproduction? It's a biological process by which new individual organisms are produced. So do all living organisms of a species are similar? So why it is important? It is important because, as I said in my earlier slide, if there is no reproduction, I'm going to write reproduction as simply as or. If there is no reproduction, what happens? This will lead to extinction. If there is no reproduction, this will lead to extinction, right? So if you see here, during the process of reproduction, or suppose if an organism is living in one particular environment, okay, so what happens, the environment is become altered, okay, so there is some environment or habitat, there is an environment or habitat, so which will going to, which changes with time, okay, so with time there will be some changes in the environment. So for these changes, these organisms what are living in this particular environment, they have to adapt, these organisms have to adapt to the changes, these organisms have to adapt to the changes. So if they don't adapt, what happens? If they don't adapt, the organism may survive or may not survive. It means the organism may die. So in this case, what happens? Suppose if there are 100 organisms, okay, in the natural environment, there are 100 organisms. Okay. So in this 100, only 40 has been adopted. Only 40 have been adopted. So only this 40 will survive. Rest 60 may die. Okay. So why I am talking this? Because so if you see here, all organisms, like if you see yourself and your friends and your parents, so we all are human beings. But do we all look same? No. Do we all look same? No, we don't look same, right? So it means there is, even though we all are human beings, we have same number of two eyes, one nose, one mouth, two ears, two hands, and two legs. But still we are different from one another, right? So this is what I want you people to understand. Okay. So though all organisms are physically similar, it means we have the same number of eyes, ears, nose, mouth. Our body structure is same. Our body design is same. But internally, inside the cells, there will be a nucleus, and nucleus contains the DNA. So this DNA is different. The DNA is different. That is what we are calling here it as chemically dissimilar. So physically we are similar. That means when we talk about the body design, we look same, but still we are different from each other. Why we are different? Because there is a difference in the DNA. Okay. So is there any exception case? Yes. In case of identical twins. Suppose if from one zygote, if by any reason, if it breaks into two, so the mother gives rise to twins. So in this case, the DNA of these two people will be similar. The DNA will be similar. So we call them as identical twins. Okay. So if you talk here, the composition of why we are look dissimilar, because the composition of DNA is different. So this DNA is responsible for the differences in among us. So now let us talk about the reproduction in unicellular organisms. So you already know what is meant by unicellular organisms. It means single-celled organisms. So if you talk about the reproduction in single-cell organisms, they reproduce by a process called mitosis or simple division. The another name for this is simple division, and the daughter cells formed, they are exactly same to the parent. Suppose if this is the parent cell, suppose the DNA content I am writing as N, and this DNA will get doubled first, it will become 2N, and then the cell will divide, and 2 daughter cells will be formed. And the DNA content will be equally distributed between the 2 daughter cells. So this is how the mitosis takes place. So if you see here, during the doubling process, when the DNA want to become double, there will be some errors in the copying mechanism. So because of these errors, there will be a changes in the organism. Because of these errors, there will be change in the organisms. Okay. So usually all the unicellular organisms, or we can say most of the unicellular organisms, they reproduce by asexual mode of reproduction. Most of the unicellular organisms reproduce by asexual mode of reproduction. In coming lectures, we will be talking in detail about these different types of asexual modes of reproduction. As of now, let us talk about the reproduction in multicellular organisms. Okay, so multicellular organisms, what are multicellular organisms? It means they have an organization. Usually, in simply we can tell the cells, group of cells will form tissues. So with the group of cells, it will form tissues, and group of tissues will form organs, and group of organs or organs working collectively working together, it forms organ system, and finally this will make an multicellular organisms. Okay, so these multicellular organisms, usually the reproduction is very different in them. This reproduction process involves meiosis, fertilization, okay, embryonic development, and you can also include gamete formation here. Okay, by the meiosis the gamete formation will take place, and then the gametes will fuse. Okay, suppose if there is a male and there is a female, so both of them will, the reproductive structures will produce germ cells. By the process of meiosis they will produce the germ cells. So let us assume this as the germ cell of male, and this is the egg cell, or it means it's as a sperm, and this is the egg. And when these two fuse, it means the process is called fertilization, then the zygote will be formed, and this zygote will be undergoing some development inside the mother's womb, that is called embryonic development. So all such aspects we usually observe in the multicellular organisms. Okay, so let us rewind once again. So there is a male and a female. Okay, so by the process of meiosis, males will produce sperms and female will produce egg. So this process is by the process of meiosis. Okay, and the gametes will be formed. The gametes will get fertilized. So when this fuse, this is called fertilization. Then the zygote will be formed. So zygote will undergo embryonic development inside the mother womb. Like for humans, the embryonic development time is 9 months for humans, right? So all these aspects we observe only in the multicellular organisms. So these organisms usually reproduce only by the sexual mode of reproduction, and there are lot of variations. So comparatively, when we compare the single cellular organisms and multicellular organisms, variations are quite common in multicellular organisms. Why the variations are quite common? Because the newly forming organism is receiving DNA from both the parents, right? So if you remember the previous slide here, in the previous slide, what you have seen here, only one parent is there, and from this parent the DNA will be get doubled and that is distributed. But here in this case, both the parents will contribute the genetic material to the new daughter organism. So that is the reason there will be a combination of alleles. Because of the combination of alleles, there will be a change in the phenotype, and usually during this process of meiosis, crossing over or chiasmata will take place. So this crossing over or chiasmata will also lead to the variations. Okay. So comparatively, the organisms which reproduce by sexual mode of reproduction have more variations when compared with the organisms reproduced by asexual mode of reproduction. So now let us look at a few questions. So list out two types of reproduction. Which one of the two is responsible for bringing in more variations in its progeny and how? Reproduction is one of the important characteristic features of living beings. Give 3 reasons in support of the statement. When a cell reproduces, what happens to its DNA? Newly formed DNA copies may not be identical at times. Give 1 reason. List 2 reasons for the appearance of variations among the progeny. So when I am trying to read the question, try to recollect the answers. So all the answers you can find in the video itself. So try to answer it on your own. If you cannot answer, just rewind the video, go back and check the video again and try to answer on your own. Thank you for watching the video. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about types of reproduction.